What I want you to do is pull out your post-test if you would, because as I'm doing the training, I will try to give you as many answers as I possibly can so that you get a good score on this. You have to score 70% in order to pass it. And if you get less than that, you'll have to take it again. So I'd like to see you pass it. So again, my name is Sheila. Oh, the other thing I want to mention on the test, if in parentheses next to the test it says there is more than one answer, there is more than one answer. And there's typically 3 answers to that question, just to make you aware of that. I know a lot of times when I get the test back, people only mark 1. So I just want to share with you that I give you a hint on that so you can mark all the correct answers. So again, my name is Sheila Loftus. I am the Corporate Compliance Officer here at TIC, and this is an annual training. You are required to take this training once a calendar year. So because you're taking it today, you're good for this year. But if you are still doing this job next year, you'll have to take it again sometime next year. It doesn't necessarily have to be in February. And as a matter of fact, for people that have worked here for more than a year, we usually have annual trainings, either at staff meeting or we have special trainings for certain programs that are annuals. So you don't have to worry about trying to schedule something next year if you're still working here. I want to give you a little bit of background on this. So back in 2005, the New York Times did an article on Medicaid fraud and abuse. And the title of that article was New York State Medicaid fraud might lead into the billions. Now that was back in 2005. Here we are almost 20 years later. And I wonder how much Medicaid fraud is at this point. They don't talk about that too much. So, part of the reason, so after that article came out, New York State and the federal government decided to establish the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General. And the acronym for that is OMIG, O-M-I-G. And their job is purely to audit agencies that bill Medicaid for services to make sure we're not committing fraud. So in addition to people having to take corporate compliance training, we have to have a corporate compliance officer, which is me. We have to have policies and procedures in place that people could report fraud if they were aware of it. And we need to have internal and external audits. And that's part of the first question on your test, by the way. The last thing I want to mention on this slide is that although I specifically mentioned Medicaid during this training, I want you to be aware that all our funding sources have very similar rules and regulations. But I just can't list all of those as I'm doing the training. So I specifically talk about Medicaid because that's typically what I look at. But all the other funding sources we have do have similar laws, rules, and regulations, just so you're aware of that. So what is corporate compliance? It's a system designed to detect and prevent violations of the law, as well as the likelihood of unethical and fraudulent behavior. Stop the behavior as soon as possible. Discipline the individual involved, including those who know of violations but fail to report them, and make recommendations to policy and procedure when it's necessary. Now, I will tell you, in terms of making recommendations to policy and procedure, because we are mandated by the federal government to do this, there's not a whole lot we can change. Some little minor changes we can make, but typically, whatever the rules are, we have to follow the rules. The other thing on this slide is I want to talk about how people log in to provide services. If you work in-house, then you're going to use Payco. You're going to log in, when you start for the day. Maybe if you go to lunch, you log out, log back in when you come back, and then log out for the day. But for people who provide services outside of the building, direct support professionals, employment specialists, they have to log in using some type of web-enabled equipment. So a lot of the DSPs do use tablets that we provide for them. If they don't want to use a tablet, they can use their own device like laptop, iPad, home computer, that type of thing, or they can actually use their phone. Employment specialists do the same thing. Some of them use tablets, some of them do not, and use their own method of logging in on their own, the types of equipment they have at home. And then the last group of people are called consumer-directed personal assistants. They are basically personal assistants for people who live at home. They log in using their consumer's phone. They are required to do that because we want to make sure they are where they say they are. So, so they do have to use their consumer's phone. And I want you to be aware that if you do use the EVV, which stands for electronic visit verification. So if you are a DSP, employment specialist, or CDPA, and you log in, that what happens once you log in, that your location is grabbed by GPS, so we know exactly where you are, and it puts into a computer program that we can look at. And if you are not where you're supposed to be, then it highlights it in yellow to make it stand out, like we probably wouldn't notice that. So I know when I first start working here, I had and we started this EVV, I had a worker, a CDPA, who logged in from New York City. So we did check. She wasn't providing services. She was actually Christmas shopping. So she doesn't work for Stick anymore. But you know, again, if you are using the system where you log in, understand that we will know where you are. So make sure you're logging in where you're supposed to be. The benefits of a compliance program: it provides guidance to employees regarding appropriate behavior as it relates to fraud and abuse. So you get training on this at least once a year. It improves the quality, efficiency, and consistency of services. So again, back when I started working here, gosh, almost 13 years ago, I had a consumer call me and she said, my worker is always here. She's always here. And I'm thinking, oh, great. She's calling to give me some positive feedback on her worker. And then she went on to say, but she sits and watches TV. So if you are providing services based on either your job description, or if you are providing services and you have a plan of care and you're following that, your person is getting better services than the person who had somebody sitting and watching TV. Again, we would encourage you to report potential problems, and I will explain that how you would do that in a couple slides from now. Again, initiates appropriate and decisive corrective action when we're able to do that. And hopefully through early detection, it minimizes the amount of money we pay back to the government when they come and audit us. Who is responsible for corporate compliance? Every Stick employee is responsible for corporate compliance, and that's the answer to that question. So, and the reason for that is that a lot of the services Stick provides are with workers outside of our building. So again, the direct support professionals are usually out in the community, showing people around, maybe helping them with volunteer work, looking for maybe types of interests that they have, that type of thing. An employment specialist is working on the job with an individual to teach them their job. And in the Consumer Directed Personal Assistant program, those workers are working in the consumer's home and again, providing services based on the plan of care they have. So we can't obviously be watching everybody and what they're doing because of so many people being outside the building. That's why it's everyone's responsibility to make sure they're doing the right thing. The corporate compliance plan includes the program, the code of conduct, and incorporates any applicable state and federal laws. This is our code of conduct. It says you will maintain professional relationships with consumers, meaning we would expect that you would treat everyone with dignity and respect. You would not be abusive to them, steal from them, or treat them in any way badly. That you would provide excellent services, again, based on your job description, or if you are providing services as a DSP, employment specialist, and so on and so forth, the plan of care that's in place on the service plan. That you would protect confidential information. Keep in mind that the services you provide to people, the information you have is confidential. It should not be shared with other people out in the parking lot. It should not be put on social media, particularly the person's name and personal information. And you should not be sharing information with family members unless your individual has told you it's okay to do that, or you are providing services to a child. Again, we would encourage you to report fraud. And again, I'll tell you how to do that in a couple of slides from now. And you would avoid conflict of interest. And if you're a consumer directed personal assistant, you are not allowed to provide services to your spouse or to a child under the 21 years of age. If you are a direct support professional, you are not allowed to provide services again to your spouse or to somebody that you live with. And the last thing is keeping accurate and complete records, and that would have to do with, logging in and logging out correctly. And if you are somebody that is required to write notes, that you write your notes quickly after you provide a service so you don't forget what you did, basically. This is Stick's mission statement. Stick's mission is to shape a world in which people with disabilities are empowered to live fully integrated lives in their communities. We offer assistance, advocacy, and services to children and adults with all disabilities, increasing their independence and allowing them to pursue their dreams. We also support their families and friends, as well as businesses, agencies, and governmental entities, enabling them to better meet the needs of people with disabilities. And finally, we educate and influence our community and public policy so that everyone can access their world. This is FIC's value statement. It says we value the ability of every human being to reach for their dreams. We hold that each individual has strengths and weaknesses which must be taken into account in their journey toward their dreams. Each individual must accept responsibility for their dream, their journey, as well as the work to get there. We offer support, ideas, tools, training, respect, and concern. We will not do for when it can be done by the person. We will not patronize for the sake of efficiency or in the guise of caring. We will try to understand when this causes fear, anger, and frustration. As we develop programs and policies, we will be guided by the dreams and abilities of those we serve. No matter how difficult the road is, we will always choose the path of inclusion and integration. We will not sacrifice our principles or values for money, convenience, or expediency. We will not shy away from controversy if that controversy will further our mission. And finally, we offer hope and continue to look at each person as a unique and joyful experience that will teach us and take us on a journey that we've never been. So STIC is an independent living center. So our philosophy might be a little bit different than some of the other local agencies. We believe that people with disabilities should be empowered to control the direction of their own lives. This means choosing their goals, plotting their course, taking responsibility for the actions and the results. People with disabilities have the right to make their own choices and decisions, and the right to make mistakes and learn and benefit from those mistakes. So I don't know about you folks, but I know that I tend to learn more by the mistakes I make than by the successes I have. So we don't necessarily believe if you have a disability, you belong in a group home, a nursing home, or any other kind of home, if that's not where you want to be. So a lot of the services we provide allow people to be as independent as they can. And again, in terms of direct support professionals, teaching people about the community, maybe how to ride the bus, employment specialists, teaching people a job, and certainly the people and consumer-directed personal assistant. If they weren't providing services to their consumers, in a lot of cases, those people might need to be in nursing homes, which is where they don't want to be. So again, we try to provide opportunities for people to be as independent as they possibly can be. These are some of the applicable state and federal laws that have to do with fraud. The first one is the Federal False Claims Act. It was first implemented during the Civil War to target corrupt carpetbaggers. So apparently even back during the Civil War, people were committing fraud. It was used in the 70s to combat profiteering in the aerospace and defense industry. And in the 1990s till today, it's being used for Medicare and Medicaid fraud. So it talks about knowingly presenting a false or fraudulent claim for payment or approval. So you falsify maybe your login or when you work, so on and so forth. Effective August 1st of 2016, anyone who knowingly makes a false claim is liable to the U.S. government for a civil penalty of no less than $10,781 and no more than $21,563, plus 3 times the amount of damages. And the amount of damages would be whatever money you received that you shouldn't have because maybe you didn't work all the hours you wrote down or mileage or whatever else. The next law is called the Administrative Remedies for False Claim. Again, talks about allowing administrative recoveries by federal agencies if you knowingly falsify a claim. And again, August 1st of 2016, if a person knowingly makes a false claim, the agency receiving the claim can impose another penalty of up to $10,781, and they may recover 2 times the amount of the claim. I want to let you know that they don't just get you on one law, they get you on all these laws, so you'd be paying back the money from the first law as well as this one. The New York State False Claims Act, very similar to the federal ones. The big thing that I noticed with New York State false claims is what they decided to do is if somebody should report you to them, that you were committing fraud, and they do an investigation and they discover that you did commit fraud, the person that reported you gets a percentage of whatever money you paid back to the government. So I think why they did that was hoping that people would report more fraud because they'll get money for it. So that is something different with the New York State False Claims Act. The next piece of law is called Social Services Law. It talks about applying for or receiving public assistance, including Medicaid, by intentionally making a false or misleading statement or intending to do so. I always mention on this particular law is that I had a friend of mine, a number of years ago who applied for food stamps in Broome County. She was a single mom, and when she filled out the application, she neglected to write down the income of her 16-year-old son, who at the time was earning minimum wage and was working part-time. She never saw the paycheck. She cashed them and took care of it. And she just didn't think about it when she filled out the application. So she was called in by the district attorney at the time and accused of fraud. And so she tried to explain to them that she simply forgot, and they didn't believe her because I'm sure everybody says that. So she ended up getting an attorney and had to defend her. And eventually, Broome County did concede that she probably just made a human error, but they did sanction her for a whole year. So she wasn't able to get food stamps for a whole year because of that human error. So I always mention that if you are assisting somebody with getting service, Medicaid or Medicare, and you probably all know this already, make sure that all the income is down on that application. And I'm sure that whoever's doing these jobs knows that already, but I always mention that because at the time she was a Medicaid service coordinator, and I think she knew that and just forgot. So I just think I always mention that when I do the training. The next piece of social service law talks about the folks who get Medicaid through Social Security. So if a consumer you're providing services to gets Medicaid through Social Security, this law would apply to you. The penalty for making a false claim is between $6,000 and $12,000 per claim, and recoverable damages of 2 to 3 times the amount you falsely received. In addition, you might need to pay the government's legal fees, and your consumer could file a lawsuit against you. This last piece of social services law talks about people who use somebody else's benefit card to get medical benefits. And I really don't know how much that happens anymore. I haven't heard a lot about that. I know in the past, Medicaid cards didn't have pictures on them. And I think at that time, a lot of people were using somebody else's benefit card to get medical benefits. And then they put a picture on it. And then I heard that it was easy to take out the picture on the card and add their own picture to it. But I haven't heard anything in the last couple of years about that. But if you did that, if you used somebody else's Medicaid card to get services and you got caught, social services can recover 3 times the amount of incorrectly paid claim plus a penalty of $2,000 per claim. And if you did it again within 5 years, the penalty goes up to $7,500 per violation. So that's the end of the laws about paying back money. This law talks about going to jail because under penal law, healthcare fraud is considered larceny, and that's a felony. So a false claim over $1,000 is larceny in the 4th degree, and that's a Class E felony. A false claim over $3,000 is larceny in the 3rd degree. It's a Class D felony. A false claim over $50,000 is larceny in the 2nd degree, a Class C felony. And a false claim over $1 million is larceny in the 1st degree, and that's a Class B felony. So again, years ago when I started doing this trainings, when I got to that last section about the false claim over $1 million, I would always say, if you guys bill us $1 million, we'll pick right up on it. Never dreaming that people would actually do that. Well, people, not that our agency did that, but a group of people down in New York City, they were healthcare professionals. They were nurses, doctors, physical therapists, pharmacists. What they were doing is they were enrolling homeless people in Medicaid. And then they were billing for services that they never actually provided. And I think it took 5 years for OMEG to catch them. And by that time, they billed something like $30 million. So they went, to court, and they were convicted, and they went to jail. And on the way to jail, one of the women that was involved in this scheme said, "But you don't understand, we gave those homeless people food vouchers." And I kind of chuckled to myself because I thought, I doubt you gave them millions of dollars worth of food vouchers. So I didn't think that was a very good excuse for what they did. So don't do this either. Each program at STIC has different laws, regulations, and guidelines. The description of all our programs start on page 10 of the compliance plan. If you do not have a copy of the compliance plan, it is on our website. If you go to the bottom of scroll down to the bottom of the website, on the right-hand side, it says corporate compliance. If you click on that, you will find a video, you will find the pre and post test, and you will find the corporate compliance plan. Everyone is responsible to know and understand their own program laws, regulations, and guidelines. And one of the things that I will have you sign at the end of this training is that acknowledgement of receipt. So if you want to pull that out too, you can, because you will be signing that at the end of the training, indicating that you received all the documentation that pertains to your program. So in the beginning, I mentioned part of what we have to do is also routine auditing and monitoring. So part of what I do is quality monitoring surveys, and I do it for the services we provide where people actually write progress notes. So that is people in community have been supported employment. So I look at their notes monthly to make sure that, first of all, there is a note, and secondly, they meet the requirements for billing. Oh, and I also look at files to make sure all the necessary documentation is on the files. We also routinely examine billing versus hours worked, and we do cross-reference signatures. I mention that because in the CDPA department, sometimes if they have made an error when they're logging in for services, they end up having to fill out a paper timesheet. And when they do that, their consumer has to sign off on it. And again, years ago, before EBB, we did paper timesheets. And what I recall back then is that oftentimes workers would forge their consumer's name. And what I discovered is that most people are not good at forging somebody else's name. So again, back then we started keeping signatures of our consumers to make sure if anybody had a consumer sign off on something, we could double check and make sure it was actually the consumer that did it. Externally, we have an independent auditor coming in a couple times a year to check our books, make sure we're doing the right thing. And any program that gives us money can look at our files anytime they want to. That would include XSVR, the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, the Department of Health, and the Office of Medicaid Inspector General. So it is the responsibility of all state staff to prevent and report fraudulent awful activities or suspected fraud in accordance with the compliance plan. The compliance plan is intended to encourage and enable employees and others to raise serious concerns within STIC. So this sheet, if you don't have it, again, is part of the corporate compliance plan. If you are aware that somebody is committing fraud, there are a couple of ways that you can notify me. You can call our anonymous toll-free hotline, which is 1-855-210-8495, and you can leave me a message. You obviously don't need to leave me your name because it's anonymous, but I would need to know the description of the activity, the names of the parties involved, the date and time this allegedly took place, and if you have any evidence where I might be able to locate that. In some cases, people have screenshotted me evidence, which is helpful if I'm doing an investigation. I also know that a lot of people get concerned that the reason they do it anonymously is they are concerned that somebody will guess who it was that reported them. And I will tell you, again, in the years that I've worked here and the fraud investigations I've done, there's only been one person that ever guessed who it was that reported them. And of course, my response was, I cannot confirm or deny that, which is what I always say when somebody asks me. But I thought that was pretty good. Most people have no idea who reported them. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. The other thing you can do is call me directly, and my extension is down at the bottom. Our main number is 724-2111. I'm extension 377. I've also given you our director's extension as well as our assistant director and the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General's hotline. So again, if you're comfortable calling me directly, you can do that. I will ask you the same questions. What exactly happened? Who's involved? When did this allegedly take place, and do you have any evidence? So those are the same questions I will ask you if you call me directly. So examples of things to report: violations of the code of conduct. You discover somebody had stolen something from a consumer, billing for services that were not provided, billing for services without adequate documentation, billing for more time than actually worked, or somehow submitting some type of falsified document. So I want to give you an idea of that, the last one there, the submitting falsified documents. So back a few years ago, there was an agency, a cerebral palsy agency in upstate New York, and OMEG audited them. And so part of what OMEG does is they look at people's educational background. And they don't just look at, if you are required to have a degree, they don't just look to see if there was a copy of your degree in your personnel file. They actually call the college that you went to make sure you graduated from there. So there was one of the, at the time, it was a Medicaid service coordinator who was a supervisor. And in order to be a supervisor, you had to have a bachelor's degree. So they did end up calling her college, and she went to school outside of the United States. And during the year she graduated, there was a rebellion in her country, and therefore her school was not certified. So therefore, she really did not have a bachelor's degree. So they disallowed all the billing of all the people that worked for her because she did not meet the requirements for a Medicaid service coordination supervisor. So I'll just make you aware, that's the kind of thing they look at when they come and audit agencies. Upon a receipt of non-allegation I'm sorry, upon a receipt of an allegation of non-compliance, it's my responsibility to do an investigation. I have 10 business days to do that, put it in writing, give it to our executive director. In the event that our executive director is suspected of some type of fraud, I report to the board president. Any violation that results in STIC having to repay over $5,000 of funding will be reported to the board of directors by our executive director. This is part of your test, second page, more than one answer. Every confirmed act of non-compliance may result in corrective action or discipline. Any individual that knowingly commits or is involved in any type of non-compliance will be subject to disciplinary actions up to and including termination. That's outlined in our STIC's agency, employee and agency policy and procedure manual, as well as the CDPA enrollment packet. In addition, that individual may be subject to legal action because it's against the law, obviously, to do that. Failing to report a violation of the corporate compliance plan would result in disciplinary actions. So if we discover during an investigation that you had some sense that this was going on and you didn't report it, somebody would speak to you about that, because we really need to know when somebody's committing fraud, because that typically means somebody is not getting the services they should be getting. On the other hand, knowingly making a false allegation of fraud would result in your immediate dismissal. The other thing I want to mention is if you do commit fraud, we do an investigation and we can prove you committed fraud, you will be fired from your position and you will not be able to work at any other of the programs at STIC. This is called the whistleblower protection. It says no employee who in good faith reports fraud or unlawful activities, participates in an investigation or hearing, refuses to follow unlawful order, reports service violations will suffer harassment, retaliation, adverse employment consequences, or any other manner of discrimination, and that is called the whistleblower protection. So basically, whether you're working at STIC or some other place, if you are asked to do something that you feel is unlawful or feel like it's something that's not, fraudulent, and you refuse to do it, you should not be harassed about that. They should not give you a hard time. They should not fire you for refusing to do something like that. I know years ago, I also read in New York City when people were refusing to do things that they felt were unlawful, their tires were slashed, things like that. That should never happen to you. So if you ever lose your job because of something like that, no matter where you're working, you can take your employer to court. If you win your court case, you would be eligible to get your old job back if you wanted to work there again. They would have to pay, the company would have to pay your legal fees, and they would have to pay you back any back salary, including interest that you missed out on since the time they let you go. Here at STIC, any employee that retaliates against a person who in good faith participates in reporting an unlawful or fraudulent activity would be subject to disciplinary actions. Again, that is outlined in our STIC's employee agency policy and procedure manual, as well as the CDPA enrollment packet. In addition, that person would be subject to criminal and civil charges as well. And if any employee is aware of that type of retaliation against another employee for that type of reason, he or she should report that immediately to our executive director. The whistleblower protection is in the Federal False Claims Act, the New York State False Claims Act, and New York State labor law. And this is the last thing, it is called self-disclosure. In some cases, upon completion of investigation, it's been determined that there's been a violation of the corporate compliance plan. A report must be made to the Office of Medicaid Inspector General, and this is known as a self-disclosure. Now, I will tell you that this particular process was updated in August of 2023, and they made it a little bit stricter. So previous to this, if you discovered that fraud was committed and the amount that was billed by mistake was $5,000 or more, you had to report it to the Office of Medicaid Inspector General. If it was less than that, you could simply void out the billing that you made by mistake or that you discovered was billed because somebody was committing fraud. Now, it doesn't matter how much you bill. If it's 10 cents, they don't say that. But yeah, no matter how much it is that you bill by mistake, again, by human error or by somebody committing fraud, you have to fill out a self-disclosure form. There is a full disclosure form and there is an abbreviated disclosure form. It depends on what exactly happened, how you fill those forms out. And they're pretty lengthy. We are in the process of doing one right now, as a matter of fact, first one that we've had to do. And they asked a lot of questions. You still can void out billing. You just need to let them know and the amount that you voided and when you did it and that type of thing. So I believe they updated this process because more fraud was being committed, would be my guess. So they kind of hunkered down a little bit on it and made sure that no matter how much the amount is that we billed by mistake, we still have to report it. So that is self-disclosure. Oh, you don't want that. Does anybody have any questions? I'm not hearing anything. Are y'all good? I think she had you guys muted.
No question, Sheila.
Okie dokie. So are you done with me?
Yep.